Every sound designer is asked to create some sort of a world in sound. And it's most inspiring when the whole movie essentially requires an original new world of sound.
Kurt is an Academy Award-winning sound designer who did his very first work on the first Star Wars movies. And in many ways, he's considered the father of modern sound design.
There are these iconic sounds that everybody knows.
And you meet Ben, and it's like meeting your 7th grade science teacher. He is your 7th grade science teacher. He is the guy that you're like, can you explain to me how gravity works? And he will sit down and explain it to you in a way that you completely understand it using sound effects.
I wanted to create a sound for Eve's laser gun in her arm. And I discovered years ago that if you strike a slinky-like spring with any object, you don't just get a clunk on the pickup mic or a ping, you get a pew. That happens because the high frequencies travel faster than the low frequencies. So if you listen to the sound far away down the wire, the high frequencies get there first, and then the sort of mid frequencies and the low frequencies. So you get, it's a laser gun. Most of my experience in creating sound has been in an era when you could go outside with a small portable tape recorder and gather sounds in the real world. But I've always been fascinated by the roots of sound design for movies, which really goes back to the days when devices were built to create all kinds of sounds. Disney had an artist with them for many, many years named Jimmy McDonald. And over the years, he and his team built hundreds of props which were used to create sounds in the Disney cartoons. The Disney style was to use musical sounds for sound effects. If a character impacts on the wall, that hit on the wall will probably be a cymbal crash, or maybe it's a funny timpani drum being struck. If somebody zipped across the frame, you might hear a whistle or a flute. And it worked well because those kinds of musical sounds could be controlled in the studio. Recording equipment in the earliest days was very bulky. You couldn't take it outside and go on location to record a train. And so the artists at Disney would simulate the sound right there in the studio. These gadgets could be played as if they were musical instruments, and the timing of the sounds could be tailored to exactly match the picture.
This is a rain machine. I have it just loaded in there with little finishing nails, nailed all on strips, and then a couple hands full of Mexican peas. And by rotating it slowly, you'll get the rain sound. And then get some high-pitched squeaks by getting close.
Great. Fortunately, this collection has been preserved by Joe Harrington, sound mixer and sound designer at Walt Disney Imagineering. So I had the opportunity to get a fantastic tour.
This is a classic piece of gear. Twist this clockwise, kind of fast.
Okay.
That was an old machine gun. Drawbridge chains. Hold that in your hand and pull that back.
Okay. Oh yeah, screen door.
Yeah.
Right. Now, see, I would have gone out and tried to find a screen door. You know, gone to a lot of trouble, driven somewhere, waited till it was quiet, but here it is right here. Fabulous. It's only been in recent years that I've kind of rediscovered the value of trying to stage or construct a device you can control. In the earliest days of live-action film and animation, if they needed wind, they would use a wind machine. And you can go fast and you can go slow, or you can speed up and create a gust of wind. A lot of the wind that we hear in movies has been this artificial wind, just canvas being scraped against wood. But actually I discovered by accident another way to get wind. And that particular sound was used in the big toxic waste storm. Another classic device is the thunder sheet. It's a piece of sheet metal, and you can get a wonderful low-frequency rumble out of it. The thunder sheet is used a number of places.
I think one of the reasons Ben is so good at his job is because he's a true fan of sound design, and he's an avid historian.
He's always thinking and always working, and he's a total geek about sound.
It makes him just that much more knowledgeable about what are the options, you know, what has been done and what could be done that hasn't.
He's a bit like Mr. Wizard, you know, where you'd stop by his lab, he'd be like, "Oh, Angus, I'm glad you decided to show up. I'm working on the sound effect for Wally's treads, and I'm combining the sound of a chinchilla mating with a wildebeest driving a cement truck."
It was something new for us also at Pixar that we had a sound designer in-house on a film before post, you know.
It was a little funny at first for me when Andrew would start evaluating sounds that I was making. He would show up, and 5 or 6 a group would show up, and they'd all sit around, and I'd play one little sound of a door closing, click, and everybody would think about it, and there'd be a discussion.
If it was a softer zip line kind of thing, maybe we could get away with keeping it in there. But I think whatever we end up on the final equation, we should let what his job is win out.
We're dealing with sound effects on our initial rough storyboard reels to a level of commentary and critique that I would usually wait for post-production.
That's a little too kazooey. You just want a more sort of almost Eve-like, womb, you know, kind of glow.
If that squeak sounds kind of sad and you never meant it to sound sad, it'll throw it that way. So you can't ignore it.
When Ben came on, he had to really figure out what's the overall language in this movie for these types of characters, and how does that fit into the overall soundscape that we're designing for the film.
I usually first think, if these objects, places, or robots, or machines really existed, what would they sound like? How would they be powered? What would be the actual physics of how they work? But if I find a sound isn't working within a scene, I'll abandon the science and go with what works emotionally.
He's so thoughtful about these things that he creates that really almost wouldn't need a logic, except that the only reason they are great is because they have a whole logic and backstory. It's what makes what he does feel real. It makes you believe it.
I heard a sound in an old war movie on TV. There was a private cranking a generator to provide power for an army radio in the field. I found one of these old army generators on eBay. And it's the sound we use for Wally when he has to be quiet in a given scene. He's not going very fast. When Wally gets going at high speed, additional sounds are added to his driving motors. And one of the principal elements comes from a device called the inertia starter, used to start the engine on an old airplane. And it's a classic sound, often used for the Roadrunner speeding up or the Tasmanian Devil spinning in a circle. Creating sound effects is one task, but creating voices is the hardest task for me as a sound designer. Our audience is very sensitive to analyzing voices because we do it all day long, every day.
Aha! Ha!
Sound effects can function like a voice. Sound effects can be expressive. Another technique would be to start with the human performance and modulate a sound effect. The human performance is driving the shape of the twanging Jew's harp. Disney was also responsible for using one of the most innovative electronic tools for modifying the human voice. Back in the 1940s, the device was called the Sonivox. And this device involved playing a sound over a small pair of speakers. And a performer would hold the speakers against their throat.
The train sounds are all on here. You hold these over your vocal cords and move your lips, like this. All aboard, clear the track. All aboard, let's go.
Eve, Eve.
The voice of Eve is a modern example of the same technique. In this case, I'm using a device called a vocoder. And you can input into this device a human recording, a human voice at one end.
Go ahead.
In this case, it's Alyssa Knight.
Directivo. Directivo. Directivo.
I like that. And at the other side of the device, you can put in a tone.
Directivo. Directivo. Directivo.
Changing the performance and giving it electronic nuances.
Aimuanka. Directive.
You wanted to have all the soul of a human being might have in the performance, but you wanted it to sound like the voices were synthesized, that they were coming from a machine. Wally's voice started with recordings I would make of myself. And then it's analyzed and broken up into its component parts within the computer. It changes the volume and pitch of the sound. And the tilt of the pen actually affects the way the sound is resynthesized in the computer. And I can add an additional level of performance to it that way.
Wally. Wally.
And all of these sounds add up to the world of Wally.